It's late. The year is 1991. Inside a cavernous, empty commercial warehouse, a man named Clark is entirely alone. He isn't supposed to be living there, but his life has completely shattered. His marriage is over, his finances are ruined, and every single night, he drowns his bitter regrets in a bottle of cheap whiskey just to stop the noise in his head. He is by all means a man that has been hollowed out by intense trauma, self-loathing, and despair. He is completely vulnerable. And on this particular night, the warehouse begins to do something deeply abnormal. Out of nowhere, a massive power surge ripples through the entire building. Desperate and exhausted, Clark drags himself up to check the main breaker box. On the surface, everything looks normal. Unable to find the source of the glitch, he decides to call a professional. The next day, a repairman arrives. He runs his diagnostics, checks the wiring, and admits he doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. Confused, Clark walks him over to the breaker box to show him exactly where the surge happened. They open the metal casing, and that's when they see a completely new addition. Embedded in the steel box are 3 red switches that do not seem to connect to a single wire in the entire building. The electrician reaches out and tries to flip them, but nothing happens. They're completely dead. Baffled, the repairman packs up his tools and leaves Clark alone in the quiet warehouse. Later that night, the heavy drinking seems to start again. Clark is upstairs, watching television and drowning in his own self-loathing. Suddenly, the TV screen goes completely black. But as Clark stands up in the flashing chaos, he looks down the dark stairwell. Driven by raw frustration and alcohol, Clark heads downstairs into the eerie quiet of the basement. He marches straight up to the breaker box and flips all the standard switches. Nothing. No response. Finally, his eyes lock onto those 3 mysterious red switches. Out of pure exasperation, he reaches out and flips them. The entire building goes completely black. Panicked, Clark desperately tries to flip the switches back on, hitting them over and over again, but the power is dead. Giving up, he turns to walk back upstairs. And that is when he sees it. Etched into the concrete wall of the basement is an impossibly thin line of yellow light bleeding through the dark. Drawn by a strange, reckless curiosity, Clark steps closer, pressing his hands and next his face toward the glowing crack in reality. And just like that, he vanishes from the face of the earth. Now, if you've been tracking the internet lately, this sounds like the classic opening of a sci-fi mystery. In fact, millions of people right now are completely obsessed with A24's new Backrooms film, trying to solve this exact case like a puzzle box. They're analyzing corporate logs from the Async Corporation, mapping out spatial anomalies, and trying to figure out the exact science of how a human being accidentally no-clips through reality. But before we go a single step further, spoiler alert is officially in effect. If you haven't watched this nightmare yet, bookmark this video and come right back, because everyone trying to solve this movie as a sci-fi government accident is completely missing the real horror. They're staring at the machine and missing the monster. This isn't a story about a corporate glitch. It's a tragedy about a slow-burning psychic predator, a sentient ecology that doesn't just eat flesh, it hunts on human trauma. Now, I'm specifically analyzing what this film shows us, not the web series, not the creepypasta, because Kane Parsons made deliberate choices about what to put on screen, and those choices tell a complete story on their own. With that being said, today I'm going to prove to you that the Backrooms didn't swallow Clark by accident. It smelled blood in the water. It waited until his personal frequency hit absolute rock bottom, and then it dangled the bait. But how did this predatory dimension get a foothold in our world in the first place? To understand that, you have to look at the shadowy corporation watching Clark's entire descent on surveillance footage, Async. Later in the film, we get a massive clue, a newspaper clipping mentioning an MRI study, confirming that Async originally started out as a medical company manufacturing MRI machines most likely. But think about what an MRI machine does in the real world. It uses powerful electromagnetic fields to map the physical structure of the human body. My theory? Async wasn't trying to open a portal to a monster. I think they were experimenting with extreme high-frequency electromagnetic waves, maybe to push their imaging tech a little bit further. But to put this in perspective, human eyes are completely blind to roughly 99% of the universe's electromagnetic spectrum. We live in a microscopic sliver of visible light, completely unaware of the massive sea of invisible frequencies surrounding us every single second. Async was aggressively weaponizing that hidden 99.9%, but they pushed the system too far and overloaded the logical grid. And here's the real cosmic horror of what they did. Async didn't just trigger a localized power issue. They broadcasted a high-frequency beacon into the dark corners of the universe. They left a permanent invisible trail right to our doorstep, and something out there came running. This predatory dimension sniffed out that sudden transmission, tracked the signal back along the lines, and smelled human trauma like blood in the water. It realized we were the perfect food source. It anchored itself to the warehouse grid, parasitically using the building's own power to project its trap into our visible world. It dangled those 3 red switches as a custom-made doorway just for Clerk. Async didn't just build a gateway, they rang a cosmic dinner bell, and the hunter answered. Think about how a deep-sea anglerfish operates in the pitch black of the ocean floor. It doesn't hunt by chasing prey. It can't. Instead, it grows a tiny glowing lure out of its own head and dangles it in the darkness, waiting for a blind or vulnerable creature to wander just a little too close. In psychology, there's a concept known as altered risk perception. Basically, when a human being is drowning in severe depression and self-loathing, their brain's natural survival defenses completely shut down. They stop looking out for danger because mentally they feel like they have nothing left to lose. The Predator detected Clerk's exact emotional frequency. It knew his defenses were down. Those 3 red switches on the breaker box weren't a mechanical failure. They were a biological lure, dangled by a living predatory dimension. It fished for him. He bit, and the trap snapped shut. Once the predator pulls you into its belly, it doesn't just kill you right away. It's a slow feeder of sorts. It constantly shifts the room, warps the architecture, and distorts reality for one specific purpose: to keep your mind entirely confused. Because a confused mind pumps out terror, panic, and despair. And for this entity, that raw psychic energy is sustenance. And the weapon it uses to disorientate you? Your own mind. The Backrooms feeds on your cognitive flaws, mirroring our minds to build broken, distorted versions of places and people we remember. And the directors drop a massive, unforgettable clue about how long this process takes right at the threshold. When Mary goes looking for Clerk at his storefront, she looks down and the camera reveals a pile of old, uncollected mail sitting under the door. Now, we don't know the exact timeline, but the visual tells us everything. Clerk has clearly been missing for a significant amount of time. She enters the empty building, goes downstairs to his space, and finds a dry erase board where Clerk had desperately tried to map out the layout of the Backrooms. While she is investigating, she spots a fly buzzing near a tiny, glowing crack in the wall before it disappears straight into the concrete. The fly isn't caught in a supernatural trap. It is a literal insect tracking the physical scent of decay from a corpse hidden deep on the other side. Mary reaches out, pushes her hand through the distortion, and steps completely into the Backrooms. And it's only after she begins to explore these endless yellow hallways that she stumbles upon a bird. In ancient lore and spiritual philosophy, the bird universally represents the higher mind, our intellect, our reason, and our elevated human consciousness. When Clerk first arrived in this space, that bird was alive. His higher mind and his basic human consciousness were still functioning as he tried to rationally navigate his surroundings. But now, when Mary finds that exact same bird, it is completely dead and decaying on the carpet. The directors are giving us a profound psychological status report. The dead bird signifies that Clark's higher mind is officially gone. Over his time in isolation, the environment completely withered his spiritual and intellectual defenses, which is why by the time Mary finally reaches him, Clark has now dragged a captive woman all the way down to the absolute bottom, approximately 8 more floors down into the dark. Now, across global lore, the number 9 always designates the absolute basement of spiritual decay. The dead bird proves his higher mind died near the entrance, and by descending to the 9th floor, he has lost his humanity entirely, devolving into a feral, animalistic frenzy of raw, base survival instinct inside a psychological hell. And it's here on the 9th floor where we see the absolute tragedy of a mind completely hijacked by a predator. Clark has Mary tied to a chair. He is desperately trying to force her to roleplay as his ex-wife, demanding she validate his toxic delusion, begging her to tell him that he was right to blame his failed engineering career on everyone else. He is clawing for a fix to his shame, using his broken memories to try and force a new reality. Now, according to director Kane Pixels himself, this exact table confrontation is essentially the engine of the film. Everything has been leading to this precise psychological pivot. Because Mary snaps, she looks at this broken man and says the words that shatter the entire matrix. You don't have to change. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a release, but it's actually a devastating crossroad. By telling him he doesn't have to change, she feeds directly into his ultimate self-deception. That sudden surge of peak toxic emotional energy triggers the environment. The emotional harvest is at its absolute prime, and the monster instantly manifests in the room. But look at the form this entity takes. It appears as Pirate Clark. Earlier, Mary found a crude drawing of a pirate that Clark had etched onto the basement wall during his long isolation. The Backrooms didn't just randomly generate a monster. It reflected the contents of Clark's breaking mind. It took the lowest, most self-loathing version of himself, the caricature of his failures that he was most reminded of, and gave it a physical form. The beast is a literal mirror of his own internal decay. But look at how Clark reacts. He doesn't scream, he doesn't run, because he has been trapped down there for so long. His broken mind has actually rationalized this creature as a companion of some sorts. He has been in the loser seat long enough to think they share a dark relationship. He steps toward the beast, trying to commune with it. Like a protective partner, he points back to Mary and desperately whispers, "She said we don't have to change." It is a chilling surrender. Clark embraces the monstrous version of his own lie because staying a victim in the dark is easier than facing reality. But the predator doesn't care about his attempts to bond. The second Clark completely accepts the monster's logic, his psychological energy is completely spent. He has zero life left to harvest. And so, the Pirate Clark entity violently turns on him and devours him on the spot, discarding him the second he's no longer useful as a food source. But while that moment was the final surrender for Clark, it was the ultimate awakening for Mary. When Mary witnessed the horror of Clark's total self-destruction, she broke her own psychological programming. She realized she didn't have to sit there, chained to a chair, dealing with abuse just because of her own deep-seated habits of carrying guilt. She breaks free from the chair and runs, but the predator immediately hunts her down. And pay close attention to the mechanics of how this creature operates. You never see this monster just casually wandering the empty yellow halls. It only ever manifests in the immediate direct presence of a human target. Why? Because the monster isn't just a ghost. It functions as the Backroom's white blood cell, essentially. Think of this entire dimension as a massive parasitic organism. The yellow hallways are its stomach, slowly digesting your mind through trauma over weeks or months. But the exact second that digestion process gets blocked or threatened, the organism deploys its immune system to purge the threat. We saw it happen to Clark early on. The moment he stopped panicking and started logically investigating a bag belonging to a dead Async employee, his mind shifted out of his personal situation and he became a foreign threat to the organism, so the white blood cell instantly manifested to terrify him back into submission. And now on the 9th floor, it happens again. The moment Mary says, "You don't have to change," the feeding cycle is completely broken. Clark bottoms out and has zero psychic energy left to harvest, while Mary drops her psychological baggage and becomes entirely unpalatable to the room. The stomach has stopped working. This is a core rule of the ecology of the Backrooms. If it can harvest you, it plays the long game, but the exact second it recognizes it can no longer extract psychic nourishment from you, the white blood cell activates to violently eliminate the blockage. It went after Mary because it recognized she couldn't be milked for trauma, so it switched from slow digestion to total lethal extermination. The entity sends the distorted pirate Clark form after her to violently wipe her out, but it completely underestimates her. Years ago, Mary made the agonizing decision to institutionalize her own mentally ill mother, and she kept a heavy piece of concrete from their childhood home in her pocket as a physical manifestation of that lifelong guilt. In this moment, Mary drops the weight. She takes that block of concrete and shatters it over the entity's head, breaking its physical hold on her. She runs, climbing out of the lower depths until she pushes through to a section that drops her directly into a surreal fake duplicate of Clark's storefront. And it's here where the entire plot of the movie completely clicks into place. When Mary stumbles into this fake showroom, she notices something bizarre. Grouped right in the center of the room are multiple cardboard cutout figures of men with speakers attached to them, alongside a cluster of industrial gas canisters. Earlier in the film, Clark had encountered one of these weird speaker posters broadcasting random phrases in multiple languages. Most viewers think this is just a spooky glitch. I'm here to tell you it isn't. That was Async. Here's the biggest realization of the film. The Async Corporation has absolutely no clue what they are dealing with. They didn't know what the Backrooms were. They didn't know what the creature was. And they had collected zero usable clues. They are utterly terrified because random doors are opening all across the area and they cannot keep this thing contained. But they noticed a pattern. They realized the monster possibly kept returning to the specific psychological frequency of this storefront layout. So out of pure frantic trial and error, Async staked out the location. They set up a permanent blind kill zone, using this bilingual speakers to broadcast sound, desperately hoping to lure the entity back into the trap. They had been waiting for weeks, and Mary accidentally became the ultimate live bait. The moment the predator chases Mary into the center of the room, Async sensors trip. The speaker posters fire off and the gas canisters instantly deploy, flooding the room and knocking the creature out. But before Mary even knows what's happening, Async hazmat teams storm the room. They don't comfort her. They aggressively bag and wrap up the monster, carry it out, and haul Mary away with it. This completely redefines the ending. When Mary is sitting in that sterile interrogation room at the end, she isn't being processed by cold, all-knowing corporate overlords. She's being grilled by people who are completely blind. Let's be clear about one thing. Mary didn't survive because she figured out the secret rules of the maze. She got lucky. Pure, terrifyingly chaotic luck. She smashed a rock, ran up some stairs, and stumbled blindly into a preset trap. She has no master plan to offer them. And Async knows it. They are staring at her across the table in absolute desperation, begging a traumatized therapist for answers because their multi-million-dollar scientific instruments are completely useless at measuring what this thing even is. They don't know its weaknesses or if it can even be defeated. They don't know anything about it, and they are realizing with absolute horror the true scale of what they've done. If this psychic predator can open doorways anywhere and actively lure in any human, who is being troubled, and Async just gave that predator the exact coordinates to our dimension, then Earth is in a catastrophic situation. And pay close attention to the editing here. When the interrogator looks at her and says, "It's not up to me," when she asks essentially what is gonna happen with her, the film instantly match cuts straight down into the dark of the backrooms. But it doesn't just show us random yellow hallways. It treats us to a chronological horror show of everything, including Mary's entire life. The camera shows a development sign for a high-rise apartment complex that most likely is going to be built over her home. Then it cuts to her childhood home being reduced to absolute rubble. Then it focuses on her mother's literal handprint etched into the concrete. The predator has completely mapped her past, mining her foundational grief for food. And then comes the ultimate piece of nightmare fuel. The camera pans over and we see a perfect, distorted duplicate of Mary sitting in a duplicate of the interrogation room. Not a memory, not a psychiatric ward, not a different location. The exact, sterile room she is sitting in right now on the surface, wearing her current clothes. Now, most viewers assume the interrogator was just talking about a shady corporate boardroom upstairs, but that sudden cut tells us something much worse. It suggests that the ultimate authority here isn't a human corporation. The Backrooms has completely locked in on its target. Mary physically escaped the maze. She's away on the surface right now. So how does a biological mirror down in the dark have a real-time current snapshot of a room she has never been trapped in before? Because the tracking signal never turned off. The predator doesn't need you to be physically inside its walls to hunt you. Just like it psychically smelled Clark's agony from across reality and used his building's power to pull him in, it is officially locked onto Mary's frequency. It is actively feeding off her live psychic imprint, holding onto her image and mirroring her current confinement from a distance. It can still see her, and it is holding on to that image to possibly hunt her down later. Async thinks they captured a monster and put it in a physical cage, but the edit confirms the true cosmic horror. Control is just an illusion. The predator bypassed their walls, tapped directly into Mary's mind, and caged a current copy of her soul forever. Once you flip those 3 red switches, no one gets away completely clean. But anyway, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Oh yeah, and hit subscribe, follow, and all that other stuff. I'll catch you in the back rooms. Peace.